Well, hello and welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders for our second development day for 2021. It's fantastic to have your attendance, and I've been ably advised by the team that we've got over 3,500 people attending 4 sessions today, which is phenomenal effort from the whole team. And I'm really looking forward to the first session today, which is with Mark, who I'll introduce shortly. But just a little bit about the Institute of Managers and Leaders. I'm sure all of you know who we are and what we do, but obviously I'll just give you a brief introduction as to the Institute itself. So for 80 years, the Institute has been at the forefront of management and leadership across Australia and New Zealand. We offer our members a fantastic suite of learning and development, networking, mentoring, and a community for managers and leaders to join, to be a part of. And today is obviously free for our members to attend and enjoy some learning as a daily, as a regular session for our members. And it's once again a delight to welcome you all to today's session. Today's all about implementing the learning, and that's what IML is about. Our learning is not tick the box training. Our learning is about actually bringing it to life and implementing it back into the workplace. All of our programs from Essentials, Foundations and Accelerate are all about applying the learning back into the workplace so that you become better managers and better leaders. And that is the Institute's mission, to create better managers and better leaders for a better society. And we truly believe that. So today's first session is with Mark Jones. Now, there's a couple of things that I just wanted to introduce to you before we get started. Resources. All of today's resources will be emailed to you at the end of today's session, along with the recording of today's webinar. So you'll have all that for you to take forward and be able to apply back into the workplace, as I talked about earlier. Questions. There will be time for Q&A at the conclusion of Mark's presentation, and I'll run through those questions with Mark. So please send through questions throughout the webinar, and I'll obviously manage those, and then we'll get to them at the end of the session and put those to Mark and put him under the pump with some questions. And you all would have had your action plans. So the action plans were emailed to you as part of the registration process. If you don't have that, you can download that on our website, the action plan. And once again, that is all about learning, taking in the knowledge and being able to apply that learning back into the workforce. So one of the things we're asking you to do is one thing you're going to stop, one thing you're going to start, and one thing you're going to continue. From Mark's presentation today, and indeed all of the presentations. So please have that action plan ready and use it and refer back to it and reflect on it after today's sessions, because it's so important, as I said, to apply that learning from today. I'm going to be the host for this morning's session, and I'm ably handing over to my colleague Paminda Sandhu, who's going to do the afternoon session. So Paminda will run this afternoon session, slightly different, I think. She's advised me she's going to bring some more innovation to the afternoon session, which is fantastic. So please stay around for the final 2 sessions this afternoon, and Paminda will take you through those. But let's get on to Mark's session first up. So the key things Mark's going to talk about today is four key points. So when there's a skills gap, when does it look like a behavioural issue? So looking at certainly tips on how to improve problem solving within your team, dealing with frustration tolerance for both individuals and within a team, and how to build flexibility into a problem worker's day. This is going to be a great session because Mark and I were talking just before we came online about the role of a manager and leader in dealing with perceived problem workers. And so it's going to be a fascinating discussion. I know Mark wants to really turn the topic on its head, so I'm looking forward to it. Now, Mark is a facilitator with IML, and he's currently facilitating our Foundations program in Brisbane. Mark has over 20 years of experience in corporate and military training and facilitation work. He focuses on assisting organisations to lead the change they aspire to rather than attempting to manage it. Mark works with some of Australasia's largest corporations, facilitating leadership programs and assisting these organisations through the change process. Mark has significant experience in working in remote and often dangerous environments. Coupled with his extensive immersion in regional cultures, he brings a level of cultural understanding second to none. He has significant experience in the Indo-Pacific, developing and delivering culturally appropriate training in project management, leadership, team development, work prioritisation, communication, and health and safety. So, Mark, I hope that's given you a reasonable introduction, and I'll hand over to you. Welcome, Mark Jones.
Thanks, Sam. More than reasonable. I want to know who wrote that. I need to meet them and buy them a beer, I think. That was pretty damn good in there. Yeah, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Today, I wanted to start the program just by getting us to perhaps think a little bit differently. And as Sam said, perhaps even turn the entire day on its head. One of the things I learned very early on is that perception can change everything. An example of this, I was part of an international training college that brought people from all around the world to Australia to undertake training. And while they were here, we would give them a small stipend. We paid all their accommodation, their meals, etc. And we had one country that was constantly, whenever they got here, saying, "Where's my money? Where's my money?" And we'd explain to them it's a 2 to 3 week process to get money. They've got open bank accounts, and because the government's paying, you know, it's all got to be above board. The next day they'd be there, "Where's my money? Where's my money? Where's my money?" And the staff started to label people from this nation as greedy. And I watched for a little while, and then they started treating them like people who were greedy, who were ungrateful, who were... So one day I sat down with a very senior member from that country and I just said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Mark, you need to understand that at home, we don't use banks. They charge 10% to put money in. They charge 10% to take money out. We don't have that sort of money. So everything's cash. We don't have savings." And he said, "So when we come here to Australia, it's a wonderful opportunity. But back at home, our families have nothing." And I said, "Yeah, but what about their salaries that they're being paid? They don't need to spend them here, they'll receive them at home." And this gentleman said to me, "Mark, the paymaster will come out and call their name, and if they're not present, he keeps the money because that's his business." And I suddenly realized these people were not greedy people. They were not ungrateful. In fact, they were incredibly wonderful people who had a problem. And we needed to solve the problem if we wanted to help the person. So we wound up setting up a fund where through the assistant defence attaché in that country, we would actually give their family money until such time as their Australian stipend came through. And suddenly these people could concentrate, they could focus, and they could fully engage. We could have labelled them as a problem people, or we could have labelled them as people with a problem. And that's what I want to have a look at today. If we change our perception of somebody, do we get a different answer to the problem? Now, jumping through to our first slide here, today is a mind map of everything that was happening in my mind as I was preparing this. So it's a little bit messy, but wait till the end, I think it'll all fall in place. I want you to think of a problem worker that you've had in the past. And you'll see on the screen it's got insert name here. So please, in your mind, insert a name there, somebody that you consider to have been a problem worker. Now, if they're in their office with you at the moment, don't shout out the name and don't write the name down in front of them. Could be a little bit embarrassing. Now, as you think of that problem worker, I want you to answer a few questions for me. Did you see any of these behaviours displayed in this person? Losing it over minor things. So minor issues, minor problems, and you saw a major overreaction in there. Did you see negative reactions to changes? Whether those changes were strategic, big changes, or whether they were just changes to do with daily routines and activities. Were they constantly resisting, pushing back, and perhaps even had become that employee who was retired in place? They have RIP on the back of their chair, and they're just going to sit there and wait for the world to come back around to them. Did they display poor interactions with colleagues? Did they have a victim mentality? Now, victim mentality, it's not my fault. There's nothing I can do. Everybody else is to blame. They're all picking on me. I can't change anything. I'm the victim here. And did they have an over-reliance on you or others to tell them what to do? The sort of person that was quite happy to highlight a problem, but would never bring a solution. The sort of person who was happy to do what they were told, but if you hadn't told them something, would sit around and do nothing. And at times you found yourself pulling your hair out thinking there's so much here to do, why do I have to tell you? Were they the sort of person who came to you 2, 3, 4 times to ask you the same question? Quite happy to let you tell them the answer, but not happy to learn. If so, then they're probably an appropriate candidate to insert name here. At the end of this process, you probably looked at them and gone, what's your problem? And if you did, that's probably the best question you could have ever asked. When I talk about perception, what is the problem they are facing, or who is the problem? You can change your perception. To have a look at that, and this all started, I was actually watching a wonderful TED Talk by a gentleman by the name of Stuart Ablon. It's one of the resources that's available this afternoon. I'd strongly suggest that you watch this to put everything today into context. Now, he specialises in children with difficulties. But I want to perhaps expand that and just ask today, does anybody know a 42-year-old 2-year-old? If you do, then perhaps we can take some of the things that Stuart talked about with children and apply them to adults as well. One of the things that Stuart talks about in the talk that he gives is that kids do well if they can. Versus, what he's saying there is that everybody wants to do well. People want to achieve, people want to be empowered, people want an autonomy, people want to contribute. It's who we are. Now, you might be able to think of the 1% that's perhaps an exception to this, but the vast majority of people want to do well. So what's stopping them? When you think of that problem worker, the name that you've written in there, what's stopping that individual from doing well? And as part of that research, Stuart wanted to know, well, how do I skill them up to do well? And the research into it actually involved scans of the brain, having a look at which brain areas were struggling in children that weren't doing well. Now, if we talk about a 2-year-old, a 2-year-old fits the definition of a problem worker. I think if we go back to all those behaviours, we're going to see that in there. 2-year-olds have tantrums. 2-year-olds don't respond well to change. 2-year-olds have difficulty solving their own problems and have an over-reliance on you to do things for them. So what's stopping a 2-year-old? And the answer is quite simple. They found that there were 3 areas that limit a 2-year-old's ability. First of all, they have very limited ability to problem solve. They don't have the prior understanding, the prior knowledge. They don't have the learning. They don't have the experience that is necessary to enable them to solve problems. They don't have the reflection skills to be able to solve problems. Therefore, the part of the brain that does problem solving is underdeveloped. 2-year-olds are not very good at being flexible. When you've ever asked a 2-year-old to wait a minute while mummy or daddy finishes something, and they don't particularly respond well to that. They want it now. If plans need to change, if we need to do things differently, you'll get the "but you told me," and we'll get the tears and tantrums in there. So the part of the brain that enables us to be flexible on a 2-year-old, again, is poorly developed. And the last area that they have trouble with is they have low frustration tolerance. They cannot tolerate frustration. And I guess all three of these are linked. If I can't solve my own problems, then I'm going to have trouble with frustration. If I'm not very flexible, then that's going to cause frustration when change is inevitable, when things need to change. So it's just very interesting listening to him talk about these three areas. And he said the way to help a 2-year-old is to help them develop. But in children that are displaying difficult behaviours, once they're into the education system, they did the scans on the brain to find out that those same three areas of the brain were still underdeveloped compared to their peers. So I'm wondering whether in a 42-year-old 2-year-old, whether we'd find the same underdevelopment in the brain in those three areas. The second way that he said that you can look at this is that children, or I've updated that to people do well if they want to. Now, this is my choice. I can say that people do well if they can. How do I enable them? Or I can say people do well if they want to. Now, if I believe that people do well if they want to, then my problem worker is not doing well because they mustn't want to. It is their fault. They are to blame. They don't want to. Therefore, my job as a supervisor, my job as a manager, my job as a leader in this organization is to make them want to. Now, I need to motivate them. So I'll go off, get myself some motivational training in there. I'll watch a few motivational videos. I'll use my experience in life of what motivated me, and I'll decide I'm going to now motivate them. If I need to motivate them, I guess I've got two choices, well, according to McGregor anyway. I could excite them. The problem is, you know, this problem worker, exciting them is not possible. Let's just rule that one out. It's not going to happen. So if I can't excite them, then what I can do is discipline them into doing well. I can actually make them do well by increasing the amount of supervision, by giving them limited autonomy, by not trusting them with things, and by forcing them to do well. Now, depending on your perspective, you're going to take one of two journeys. You're either going to attempt to motivate the problem worker, or you're going to upskill them. If you're going to motivate the problem worker, good luck. In my experience, this is a years-long journey, many, many years. If you're going to upskill them, good luck. Because once again, it is a long journey. However, it is a journey that you can plan for and work towards. If you're going to upskill them, the first thing you've got to be looking for is opportunity. When are the opportunities to upskill them? Now, bless everybody who says send them off on a training course. That's how we'll upskill them in there, and that's how we'll solve their problem. I say bless you because once upon a time I would have said don't be so stupid, but I realized if you've got training budgets that give you the amount of money to waste on doing that, then please send them to my training courses and I'll take your money. It won't help them, but give me the money anyway. I'm happy. Opportunity in the workplace is what they need. So the first step to upskilling them is to look for opportunity in the workplace. Secondly, develop your coaching skills. You're going to upskill them in these three areas through coaching, not through training. Coaching is going to be far more effective. Third area that you need to prepare for is patience. We're undoing habits. We're undoing behaviours that have worked for a long time. We're undoing a name that this worker perhaps has had through many positions in many companies. And to undo that is going to take a lot of patience. And of course, with that comes time. You're going to need time in there. Just moving on to the next thing that Stuart talked about that I found very interesting. He said that, first of all, if you give a dog a name, eventually they will answer to it. You know, it doesn't matter what name you give them. Eventually, they respond to it. What name have you given the problem worker as you've identified them? Have you called them difficult? Have you called them challenging? Have you called them hard to work with? Have you called them a problem? Because if you have, eventually they're going to answer to that name. As part of the talk in there, Stuart talked about that children who are not difficult, they find those three areas, problem solving, flexibility and frustration tolerance, incredibly easy. Their brains have developed. And because they find that easy, they're labelled as good students, or in our case, good workers. Therefore, they receive kudos for that. They receive attention, they receive praise, they receive security in employment in there. Do they deserve this? And Stuart actually ponders that perhaps no. They're doing something that comes naturally and comes easily, and yet they're being rewarded for it. For the person that finds it difficult to do these things, and they're trying to do well, now, what are they receiving? They're receiving discipline. They're receiving name calling. They're receiving being ostracized within the team. They're receiving additional supervision. And yet, out of all the people in the office, they're the ones trying the hardest to be good. And it comes back to that precept at the beginning. Do I see this as a worker with a problem or a problem worker? And if it's a worker with a problem, perhaps they deserve more than those labels. The challenge you've got here, though, is that skills need to be taught in the actual situation. As I said earlier, training is usually not the complete answer anyway to this. Skills need to be taught in the actual situation because that's when the neural centers of the brain that you're trying to develop are active. So the start of this journey probably comes with getting yourself some skills around coaching and how to help an adult to learn well. The next part of what we had to look at, I'm just going to move something on my screen now. I wanted to look at a few useful tools for today. So some things that we can take away. If you believe that that worker with a problem has problem solving deficiencies now, and some of the clues here are that they bring problems, they don't bring solutions. They overreact to small problems. They have a reliance on others to tell them the solutions. If you're seeing some of these behaviours in there, then perhaps there's a problem solving deficiency. What are the steps that you can use with them to help them to improve their problem solving? And one of the things we talk about on the Foundations of Intentional Leadership program here at IML is a problem solving model that involves 7 steps as laid out here. The first one is you've got to identify an opportunity to collaboratively problem solve with this person. There's no point saying to them, go away, think about solutions, come back to me when you're prepared. Now, if the part of the brain that is required to do that is not developed, because what they'll do is go away and become frustrated because they can't think of solutions. That's why they went to you in the first place. So you've got to find opportunity to collaboratively problem solve. The good news in here is that this person is fairly predictable. They have problems around specific areas, and therefore it's not that difficult to think of situations where you may be able to work with them to problem solve and to help them to develop their problem solving skills. Be prepared. Don't choose something major. Don't choose something where, you know, if this fails, if the solution is not perfect, it's going to cause another crisis. Choose something easy, something that you know you'll have time and that they'll have time to problem solve. So one of the things to do here, just write yourself a list of situations where it may be appropriate to use problem solving coaching with this person. Once you've identified that situation and it's arisen, clear their schedule, clear your schedule, and make time now to problem solve. The next step, explore the problem. Explore the problem from their point of view. What are their concerns? What are their issues? How is this a problem for them? How does it affect them? Explore the problem from your point of view. How is this a problem for you? What does it cause? What are the chain reactions that occur? Explore the problem from the point of view of customers. How does this affect them? Explore the problem from the point of view of colleagues. What impact is this having on them? What are the connections that are needed to produce our outputs? How is this going to affect them? The more you explore the problem with them, the more that the solution finding part starts to open up. Now, if you get to the third step, to brainstorm possible solutions, and you only have 1, 2, 3 possible solutions, it probably means you didn't understand the problem well enough. Go back and explore the problem a little bit more. Step number 3 in there, brainstorm possible solutions. Now, you've all tried brainstorming, so quick show of hands, who's tried brainstorming? Yep, everybody. And leave your hand up if it's failed. Yeah, nearly every hand stays up. Why? Why does brainstorming fail? And I'll tell you right now, brainstorming actually rarely fails. But what you'll tell me is that it failed because it didn't produce an answer. It produced many, many answers. But at the end of the day, we just had a big list of possible solutions, but no decision. And I'll tell you right then that brainstorming succeeded. The purpose of brainstorming, and brainstorming is the work of a gentleman by the name of Osborne, who was marketing executive, BBDO's the organisation, many of you may have heard of them. And in the 1940s, he was sick of people bringing predictable solutions. And he wanted people to get more creative. Brainstorming was designed to help people become creative in their solution finding, but it wasn't designed to be a decision-making tool. So when you say to me, brainstorming's produced all these possibilities, but no decision, brainstorming didn't fail. Decision-making failed, and that's the difference. The idea of brainstorming is to get as many ideas as you can. Now, I don't know if people who've done brainstorming know that there's actually rules to brainstorming. Now, you can Google it and it'll tell you anything from 5 to 50. I'm just going to stick with Osborne's initial rules to brainstorming. The first part he said is clearly state the problem. Now, you're not going to be able to do that if you haven't explored the problem. So hence why step 2 was important. So state the problem, state it from several perspectives, understand the problem first. Now, secondly, set a time limit. Now, for most people, your brainstorming sessions are going to run between 20 to 40 minutes. If you make them too short, there's not enough time for people to get to creative or even innovative solutions. If you make your brain sessions too long, they become slow, boring, they drag on, they lose momentum. If you need to teach the process of brainstorming, then allow around 40 minutes. If your people are skilled and able to do brainstorming well, 20 should be sufficient in there, but no shorter. So set a time limit. Third rule of brainstorming, everybody participates. And that is, there are no passengers. There's nobody in here just to witness what's going on. There's nobody in here just to fill in their day. Now, if you're going to be in the room and you're going to brainstorm, then you participate. And that includes your 42-year-old, 2-year-old. And a way to help them in this process is going into the brainstorming, tell them to come prepared with 2 or 3 ideas that they have already developed. So going beyond the one predictable, I want you to come with 2 or 3 additional ideas that you can contribute. That'll be enough to get them started. By the way, if you are running a brainstorming session and people show up with no ideas ready in there, then excuse them from the session. They're not part of the problem solving, they're a passenger. We don't need passengers. The 4th rule, no judgment. And this one is incredibly important because it's so easy to judge. You know, when you say to somebody there's no money, what have you immediately done to the possibility of coming up ideas? You've shrunk it. There's actually now limited funds, so only think of things within the funding. Now, when you say to people there's no time for that, we've tried that in the past. When you say to people, oh, the boss won't like that, when you say to them that's downright illegal, you've still limited the ideas. Equally in judgment, when you say to somebody, I like that idea, when you smile at somebody and say good thinking, when you say to somebody, you know, keep going with that way of thinking, you've also limited the brainstorming process. Brainstorming should have no judgment at all. We're simply creating ideas. We'll judge them later. That's part of the decision-making process, not the process of identifying solutions. Rule number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in here. Rule number 5, piggyback. Piggyback simply means when you've done that first round where you've looked at the obvious, the predictable ones, start to build on ideas. So add to ideas in here, do not subtract. And a good way of doing this is to leave your butt at home. You know, when people say to you, Mark, I understand what you're saying, but what does the but do? And the answer is it subtracts, it takes away from the idea. No, leave your but at home. Buts damage relationships. Instead, replace it with and. I understand what you're saying, Mark, and is additive. So use the and to add to somebody's idea, never subtract. That will help you to get to creative. But if you truly want to be innovative, you need rule number 6, and rule number 6 in there, encourage the ridiculous. You know, some of the best solutions in your lifetime have come from somebody who came up with a ridiculous idea. You know, back in the 1970s, 1980s, teenage boys had a problem, and that is that they wanted to talk to teenage girls. The problem was the only phone in the house was screwed to a wall, was in a family area where the entire family could listen in. And we said, we need to help teenage boys. There's not going to be another generation unless they can hook up with teenage girls. So somebody said, well, the way to do this is get a longer phone cord, predictable. Somebody else said we could get more than one phone in the house. But then somebody said, why don't we just cut the cord off the phone? And if we judged and said, that's ridiculous, we'd never have mobile technology. You know, I look at my phone today, and my phone today has more computing power than a modern Navy battleship. Why? Because battleships were designed 20 years ago. The amazing development that we've made in phones was because somebody felt safe enough and was encouraged to come up with a ridiculous idea. And from that ridiculous idea came an amazing solution. Once you've done all of this, then you've got your ideas, your possible solutions. Now's the part about making the decision. So the first part of that, set your criteria. Criteria could be money. So it must be cost neutral. It must fit into current budgets. It must have a benefit over a period of years. You decide on the criteria around money. It could be to do with time, timeliness to implement in there, or readiness to go. It could be around resources. Do we have the available resources? Do we have the available people? Do we have the skills? But I'd like you to add a few other criteria to your decision making in here. Is it ethical? Is it moral? And I would suggest, but the choice is up to you, is it legal? Because if you don't have those criteria, you could start allowing things to slip into your decision making that don't fit in with the values of the company. Step number 5, reduce your options using criteria down to 3, and then an either or situation. Now, ways of reducing them, you could use things like nominal group technique, Pareto criteria thinking, criteria-based thinking. There's a number of tools that you can use to help you to reduce. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to make a decision. And in this case, where you're helping somebody to learn, the chances are you're going to make the decision. You're going to take the risk for them whilst they learn how to problem solve for themselves. Now, when you decide, step number 6, make the decision, you've got a choice. Do I pilot? Do I run a test and limit any potential damage? But this is a slower way and perhaps a little bit more costly in there because I'm running a pilot whilst running a primary system. Do I run parallel systems? Very costly, but very safe. If one system falls over, I simply go back to the old system. Do I just plunge in, shut down the old system and jump in? Or do I roll out in stages the solution? Now you're going to have to decide that yourself. But as part of helping the problem, the worker with the problem in there, let them know why you've decided the method of implementation. And finally, of course, on all decision making, there's a review process. Yeah. Did the decision work? Could we have done better? Did the process work? What could we have improved? What could we do to improve the process as well as the decision making? If you can do all of that, then you're on the way to helping that person develop problem solving skills. What about some of the other skills? So just jump over here and there. Flexibility. Let's have a quick look at flexibility. We don't have a lot of time left. Flexibility. Now, teaching somebody how to be flexible is actually a little bit more challenging than problem solving. First thing with flexibility is always focus on core values. Their personal core values and organizational core values. Why? Because core values don't change. And if you use your values, you're more likely to make good decisions. Now, what are my core values? Well, my core values are a set of beliefs that are in place by 7 years of age. And if those values don't align to organizational values, then I've got a problem already. And one of the tips I'm going to give you in the worksheet for today is always recruit workers based on their beliefs and values alignment to the organization. You see, it's a lot easier to teach skills than it is to change somebody's values so that they align to the organization. If you recruit the wrong person, you've got a journey of years of working on their values, and good luck with that one. Always recruit people for the right values. Tip number 2, when you've got right people, then use team norms to help to develop group values. Now, within a team, team norms are not rules. They are simply the team saying, in this team, these are the behaviours that we wish to normalise. They must align to organisational values, of course. However, get rid of the big management values words, the words like respect and integrity, and replace them with specific behaviours. In this team, we say good morning when we come in, we say good night before we go because that's polite. In this team, we clean up after ourselves because we take pride in our workplace and we don't leave a mess for others. So start to take some of those big values and break them down into team statements. In this team, this is what we do. And the third area that is going to help you with developing values is to use affirmation. When you see people using their values, then take the time to thank them. If you don't thank people, then very quickly they'll stop doing it. And then you'll be coming to me saying, Mark, I've got problem behaviours. And I'll say, well, when was the last time you praised good behaviour? You're going to say, I'm so busy dealing with problem behaviours. Yeah, a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Second step to helping them to build flexibility, help them to consider other positions. So this is that perception thing again. My boss has come to me, has asked me to take on some additional work, has said they have a project for me or something to work on. And my initial thought is, no, not more work. I'm already busy, I'm not paid enough for this, I don't want to do it. And that's my paradigm, that's my perception, that's where I'm going to work from. Will that help me? Probably not. So what are the other positions I could take? Well, I could ask myself, will this help my career? Will this enable me to display skills, display talents that perhaps others haven't seen to this time? Will this help me to build relationships with others? Will this improve my relationship with my supervisor? Will it improve my relationship with my team, with colleagues, with my peers? As I consider other positions, I can then make a decision of, well, from what position do I want to approach this request? Now, initially, when you're helping somebody to develop flexibility, you might want to identify some of the benefits of taking on a project as being, this will help you to build relationships, this will help you to display skills, this will help you to show that you're ready for in there. But what you're doing is enabling that person to see that their position will affect their behavior. Step number 3 in here, keep learning and keep improving. I don't know about you, but every time I learn something new, I suddenly find a use for it. Now, prior to having learned something new, I didn't know I needed it. And it's a truth around learning. As you learn, you'll find a use for it. But if you've stopped learning, then your ability to find a use for things, to be flexible, is limited. So continue learning. And as you continue to learn, you'll find opportunities to use it. Something I just want to throw in at this stage around keeping on learning and improving your skills is an observation I've made around position descriptions. And what I find is that 80% of the companies I visit, their position descriptions are written in a historical form. They actually tell me what the person who did this job before me was required to do. Because when they announced they were leaving, we sat down and wrote down, well, what are all the things that you do so that we can get the next person to do them? Not a lot of use to me because it tells me what was done in the past. Around 19% of companies I visit have position descriptions written as current. So the current incumbent will be required to do. So that's far more useful to me. It tells me what my role is. But it's only the 1%ers, those that excel, that actually have position descriptions written as a future-based statement. So as well as telling me what the position currently requires, there's a section in there that outlines in the future, this position may require these additional skills, these additional knowledge, this additional ability. And that actually gives me guidance that says, hey, my position is not static. It is flexible, it is changing, and I can actually play a part in preparing myself for the future rather than becoming redundant. So that's one of the tips that's in the worksheet today, just around for you to consider is, do you have future-based position descriptions? Step number 4, there, be optimistic. Put on your yellow hat. Now, for those that have done anything around Edward de Bono's 6 hats, you know immediately what I'm talking about. But in life, it's very easy for us to put on a black hat. Our black hat says, be cautious. Don't do anything that will endanger me or others. And it's a very natural way to think about things. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Very few people, though, can naturally put on a yellow hat. That is, they're an optimist. They see the best in things, they see the possibilities, they see the advantages of in everything that they do. So sometimes we've got to actually physically stop. And after we've had our initial little tantrum with our black hat on, take that black hat off and then make a list of all the positives that could come from being flexible in this situation. And it may help us to actually move forward. And the last thing in flexibility in there is plan ahead. You see, if your day is 100% booked in there, you don't have time for a crisis. You don't have time for things to change. You don't have time to be flexible because you're 100% booked in there. Plan ahead. And by that I mean build enough time in your day to deal with the unexpected. You see, if I only fill 80% of my day, then when the unexpected comes along, rather than having that black hat negative reaction, I can actually very quickly put on a yellow hat and go, hey, I put aside time today for opportunities. Is this an opportunity? Yeah. So that may help you with flexibility. And that's another one of the tips that's in your book for you, is always put time aside for emergencies. The very last area that we seem to see underdeveloped is around frustration tolerance. Now, some very quick tips on what you can do here. Number one is accept that tough situations happen. You know, rather than saying to yourself, why do I always get stuck in the slow lane? Reframe it. And you'll notice so much today is about reframing in there. Say to yourself, traffic jams are going to happen. And you know what? I've always wanted to read more, and I hear that audiobooks are a great way of doing that. I'm going to get an audiobook for the car so that in future, I don't sit here thinking bad thoughts about the person in front of me. Instead, I've accepted that traffic jams happen, and I'm going to enjoy my time traveling to my next appointment. Now, give yourself a pep talk. Now, getting angry won't help me. It won't help the person in front. So tell yourself that. Now, how will being frustrated, how will having a tantrum, how will ranting, raving, or damaging a relationship benefit anybody? And if the answer is it won't, then give yourself a pep talk. You know, people with low emotional intelligence tend to get angry very quickly. It's something that I've had to tell myself. And because I don't want to have low emotional intelligence, I can then actually reframe, okay, so how am I going to perceive this situation? Frustration tolerance, learn how to calm your body, whether that's through breathing exercises, whether that's through meditation, whether that's through gradual muscle relaxation. Learn how to actually physically calm your body. Physically calming your body will then allow your mind to follow. The final part about frustration is that it is a skill to deal with it. And therefore, like any skill, you need to work up in size. Start small and build up. Please don't go into this looking for the most frustrating thing you can do for the worker with a problem and throwing it their way. This is not a sink or swim situation. Instead, start off with small frustrations and help them. Help them to accept, help them to give themselves a pep talk, help them to calm. There, help them to learn the skills in small areas that are not triggering them to have an amygdala response. If you can do that, then they can learn to deal with frustration better. Frustration though, and frustration tolerance is a life skill. And why should they do it? I'll leave you with this. Every time you get frustrated, you damage a relationship. Whether that relationship is in the workplace, whether that's with a customer, or whether that's at home, your frustration is damaging a relationship. And ask yourself, is my limited frustration ability and my limited frustration tolerance actually something that I want to improve because I want better relationships with my partner, with my children, with my friends, and with my colleagues? Now, if we put all of that together, that's what it looks like in my mind. And yeah, it seems quite messy, but actually I think there is a logical sequence in there. Today, as we start to talk about problem workers and how to deal with them, I'm not denying that there are problem workers. I believe there are, but I also believe there are workers with problems. And I've got to be judicious in my ability to actually identify, am I dealing with somebody who is a good, genuine, decent, honest person who is struggling? And that's coming out in childlike tantrum ways. Or am I actually dealing with somebody who is malicious, somebody who is a true problem? Am I dealing with that workplace psychopath? I've got to decide in there. So going into today, hopefully this has just given you some food for thought. I'd be interested What are your thoughts? What are your comments on this? And what are your questions? This is a process that's still evolving in my mind, so I'd appreciate your input.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. A terrific lead off for Development Day. And I can think of no more difficult topic than, dealing with the tough stuff is problem workers. So you've let off certainly led off the line of today's webinars in a fantastic fashion. So well done, Mark. There's a lot of questions here. We've just got a couple of minutes for questions. So if you've got any additional thoughts, please send them through now, or questions for Mark. But just to lead off from Louise, what happens when the person doesn't see what you see as a problem?
And that's part of the go back to have a look at it from different perspectives. How does this affect the organisation? How does this affect your colleagues? How does this affect customers? How does this affect me? But also start with, how's this affecting you? Always start from their point of view, but then get them to walk a mile in other people's shoes. And sometimes they realise that they don't have a problem with what's going on, but it is causing problems for others, and they could contribute to problem solving. So that may help you there, Sam.
Paul asks, there's a saying, hire slow, fire fast. If you have made a mistake, in your hiring and have a worker who is not fitting into the culture or meeting the performance expectations, how long is reasonable to work with the worker with a problem?
And that's a great question. And it's one that we need to consider both industrial relations laws around, as well as understanding how people learn and how they change. I love the saying, that hire slow, fire fast. I'm going to give you credit for that for the next 3 times I use it, and then I'm just going to steal it as my own. And I love it. But it's very true. If you hire slow, then you'll have far more problems. And my advice is hire around values. It only takes a few years to put somebody through a degree, but it takes a lifetime to change what they believe and their values. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. As for the timing in there, yeah, recognize when helping that person move to a different position, whether that's with your company or another company, recognize when that is the best thing that you can do for the person, because keeping them here is going to expose them to a lifetime of discipline, of over supervision, of correction, of recognize quickly when you're actually doing them a favor by helping them to move, and then help them to change their paradigm to, I'm now going to help you to find a place where you will be happier in there. Rather than take it from that vindictive, I'm going to get rid of you in there. If you help them move, the whole process will work out better. Yeah, that's my advice. I'm not going to give you a time frame though.
What happens when people have just lost their passion and engagement in the role due to tenure or other reasons?
Yeah, and what you're actually talking about there, Sam, is a loss of leadership in companies. I travel the world talking about management and leadership and the difference between them. And, leadership is about taking people on a journey from where we are to where we want to be. I meet very few people who can tell me where their company wants to be 5 years from now. They're being managed and managed well, but management is about organizing, scheduling, rostering, resourcing. It's about putting in place policies and systems, and they are necessary for a company. I don't work for companies that don't manage because they won't pay my bill. But very few companies have leadership, and leadership, the military taught me very well, was about understanding where I want to be in the future, and then getting people who want to go on that journey. The reason they've lost their passion is they've lost their passion for more of the same, more management. I would suggest that you've got a loss of leadership there, and it's time to actually start engaging somebody to help coach your leaders in your company. I know you call them leaders, but the name's not enough. Help them to actually understand what leadership mentality is. And a little aside to this, I've just bounced off a company in the Indo-Pacific who saw a $100 million turnaround in 1 year by simply introducing leadership thinking and allowing that to take its course. So yeah, if they've lost their passion, often it's because they're not being led.
Yeah, great point, Mark, and I think you've answered that well. There's a question here that I actually had written down myself, which I was going to ask you offline, but Patricia's raised it here. Great point about hiring based on values. When you hire someone, most of the time they will tell you what you want to know. However, their values slowly come through. Is there any best practice with regards to handling this with new staff and letting them know where you want them to be in regards to their values? So, you know, and I've just written sort of a little bit more simply, how do you determine the values, someone's values in a recruitment process? How do you pick that up?
Yeah, and this is where I'd encourage you to strongly work with somebody who understands values, but simply values are displayed in behaviour. So when we're posed with the situation, we go through a process of, at the conscious level, I hear, I see, I feel, I taste, I touch things. At the subconscious level, I ask myself, how do I feel about this? But at the unconscious level, my beliefs, my value system kicks in. Now, when I experience something, I'll say to myself, what did I feel, taste, touch, smell? Down at the subconscious, how do I feel about this? And at the unconscious level, is this right, wrong, good or bad? Now that's going to determine my behavior. So my behavior is I'm going to choose things that are right, not wrong, based on my values. I'm going to then resort to a subconscious behavior, which is called a habit. So any habit I do subconscious, or anything I do subconsciously, is a habit. And that's going to display itself as what I do or say. So in the recruitment process, you know, what would you do? What would you say when posed with these situations? Are great questions to understand people's values. You're not looking at the answer for, was that an effective answer? You're looking at it for what values cause them to say or do what they've done. Another great question, in the past, when presented with this situation, how have you responded? Because given a choice of what people say or do, I'd rather know what they did, because they're more adept at changing what they say, but what they do is ingrained. After that, induct them into your company well and do the team norming. Without team norming, you don't have an alignment of values. Now, teams will norm by themselves, but they will do that over many years. And in that time, there'll be lots of squabbling and sorting things out. And sometimes the values that the team adopt are those of the bully, of the loudmouth, of the person with the most persuasion, not the team's values. So do team norming, look into it, find out a bit more about it, ask us. Everybody at IML is an expert at helping you to team norm in there. And then go out and actually do that affirmation part. Spend your day, and in fact, I'll challenge everybody here to find 6 things today that align to your values, to the company's values, and thank people for doing that. Thank them for taking the time to clean up, because that aligns to our value of professionalism. Thank them for taking the time to unjam the photocopier, because that aligns to our value of helping others. But once you start getting out there and acknowledging it and thanking it, you'll get a lot more of it. So yeah, hopefully that'll help you a little bit in the whole process. But my advice is start off with questions based around behavior, not based around skill sets.
Mark, fantastic advice, and something for all of us to take away, not just for today and those 6 things, but also to take away and implement back into our workplace over time. So thank you so much, Joe. I've got a number of comments here. You know, great session, fantastic. And I know Tracy McIntyre, Regional New South Wales, has said it's a great reinforcement for us as assessors. Tracy is an assessor for IML for leadership and management. And Maria said, you know, wonderful session, Mark. So some fantastic comments, Mark, coming through. And look, any questions we haven't been able to get to, we will endeavour to answer. We'll pull Mark aside and try and get him to answer those questions, and we'll get back in touch with you directly. But thank you very much to Mark for a fantastic presentation, and thank you to everyone for joining us. As I said, we've got a huge numbers today, right across the 4 sessions. Today was Mark led off with the first session, which I think has really set us in good stead for the day. And thank you very much, Mark. Now, all of today's content is a part of our programs, is part of our masterclasses, our development programs such as Essentials, Foundations, and Accelerate. We currently do have an end of financial year pricing on those programs and the masterclass, so please go online, and if this raises any questions that you've got, please email us directly, info@managersandleaders.com.au. that's info@managersandleaders.com.au, or get in touch with one of the team directly and we'll certainly be able to help you. But thank you so much, Mark, for leading off today's session. We've got Marnie Cook coming up in 30 minutes. With personality and conflict, and I know Marnie can't wait to deliver this next webinar. It's going to be fantastic. So dealing with the tough stuff will continue in 30 minutes. Everyone have a break and we'll see you then. But thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for our attendees today. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.